No.
Do you remember this house? That was on the corner of Napier and Victoria. You know, the Captain Cop's house. Do you know that name, Captain Cop?
Sure. I used to play with the kids. This was made into suites. And I used to play with the girls.
Were they Cop? Was their name Cop?
Yes.
Captain Cop?
Captain, oh gosh.
Oh, he was a naval captain.
Over 50 years he was on this sailing the world on sailing ships, and they actually bought that property in 1894. They bought 18 acres between Napier and William and Victoria and Lakewood. So Rose Street, Lily Street was all their subdivision. The Cops owned it all.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So Grandpa must have bought the Rose Street property off the
Directly from him.
the Captain Cop?
I guess. You know, and the face looks familiar.
So, and how long did
I
he
don't
own
know
the
how long he
property then?
lived, but he bought it in 1894, and he tried to sell the lots then, but of course it was way out in the middle of nowhere, so there was a little bit of a depression. He said he couldn't give the lots away. So they all got sold around 1909, 1910 is when Rose Street and Lily Street got built up in Semlin Street.
I
And
see.
that's when Grandma and Grandpa got married, was 1910.
Really?
Oh,
Wow.
so he must have bought the property.
Brand
in
new house.
09 or-
Yeah.
yeah, brand new. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Now, is that house still there?
Yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called the Aberdeen Mansion now. It's a bed and breakfast.
Oh,
You can
is it?
stay there if you want. Yeah.
It used to be always kind
You can
of
go
close
stay
to
there.
land when they were kids.
It's a bed and breakfast.
Well, for goodness sake.
Is it quite lovely inside?
It's not bad. My sister stayed there once. The trees are all overgrown in front of it, so it's a little hard to see it now.
Yes. Well, it was a beautiful mansion, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was. That was back in the days when, if you were, when you were sailing a ship, it was full of, very expensive cargo. So if the ship went down, people lost a lot of money. So he was doing it for over 50 years. So he must have had the reputation of always delivering, right, and not sinking the boat. So.
And did he sail all over the world?
All over the world, yeah. And his wife went with him, I think, for the first 20 or 30 years. She was with him on the ship, and then after that, she stayed in the house.
Now, can I inquire, how did you find out about all these people?
Well, I'm a historian, so I, whenever I come across anything, I grab it. And I've got a
Yes.
big pile of stuff at home.
I see.
But we did do a walking tour of Rose Street and Lily Street last year, because the grocery store on the corner of
Williams and
Yeah.
Rose and
Astrino's sons, they didn't want to take over that business, so they bought the little grocery store there that had been empty for 10 years, and they made it into this restaurant. And it's just so popular. It's in the middle of the residential area,
Oh,
but
for
it's
heaven's sake.
rare. There's lineups every night, and it's authentic Italian pizza.
even now.
Right now, they just opened it a year or two ago, and when they're Italians, and the whole building is stucco, right? So I don't know why, but they started taking the stucco off of the William Street wall, and underneath it was this big sign from the 1940s maybe, of Shelley's 4X bread.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
Well, that sign is now back. We restored it.
Oh.
And that's why we had the celebration last year and the walking tours and everything.
Oh, for
the
Yes.
two restaurant people were going to take that sign off and put it inside the restaurant.
Okay.
And I talked them out of it, leave it outside. So
Right.
it kind of looks like he's holding a pizza. The Shelley 4-H bread thing looks
Oh,
like
for
he.
heaven's
Yeah,
sake.
Shelley's 4X bread. Oh my gosh.
You remember that, do you?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever get to
Because-
eat any, Mom?
Yeah.
Because Grandma made bread. Did you ever?
Not
No.
very often.
They didn't
But
believe
w-
Her parents didn't leave in store-bought
this is
bread.
where my dad would walk most nights with Patty, our dog,
Oh.
and he would go on down here to Pete's store. Did you hear about him?
No, tell us about him.
Well, everybody knew Pete. He was the Greek grocer, and he lived in the store was here at the corner of Williams and Victoria, and he all the kids knew him, and if Mom and Dad needed anything, Dad would wait and buy it at night, and he would walk from the house here on Parker Street up to Victoria and along Victoria to Pete's grocery store, and my dog and cat went with Dad, and he'd go by and they'd be the cat would be up on the walks,
Oh, on the wall, the stone wall there.
stone wall,
Yeah, yeah.
and they'd have to sit outside Pete's. They weren't allowed to go in the store.
The store opened in the 20s.
Well, it seems like he's been there forever, Pete.
Pete.
And his kids, Mary and Johnny, and they lived upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's a pizza now?
Yep, it's called Via Tevere.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And they bring in everything from Italy, like the flour and the tomatoes and everything, and people just love it. It's very, very popular.
Oh, we'll have to
Yeah.
go.
You should go, absolutely. You'd enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had this cute little Italian car parked out front all the time. It's about this big, little tiny Italian car, and it just looks. I should have brought pictures of it. It's really something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
her mom and dad.
Really.
Yeah.
That's the front porch at 2066 Parker, and you won't recognize it now because when they bought the house off Grandma and Grandpa, they tore the front porch down, and the front porch now comes down the side under the front room window. Yeah. Yeah.
oh, for goodness sake. Oh my gosh. It looks huge, doesn't it? And yet, when it came, they couldn't sleep anybody more than my mom and dad could up Parker Street. my brother Alf was friends with Miller's younger son Huntley. They came up from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And Alf and Hunt were really good friends, and it was how a little child, I still remember it when the Millers arrived from Australia. They were really hoity-toity because Mr. Miller had lots of money, and he'd be up in the morning in his outfit, and he'd make his way from the big house out to the barn, which now is the foundation of a little house on Parker Street.
Did anybody know where the names Lily and Rose came from?
Never heard anything.
Nobody knew how they got named. Eh? I tried to figure it out, but I haven't been able to. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Yes.
But they're still considered to be very special streets because they're unique in Vancouver, really.
Is that right?
Well, they're designed in 1894, so the lots are smaller and there's no back lane, and they're only 1 block long.
Yes.
Most of Vancouver, the streets go across the whole city. So, and it's up just near the crest of the hill and everything. It's a special, very special place.
And I've often thought it wasn't a junky, maybe now it looks like older things, but at one time they said Grandview was kind of like Shaughnessy.
Like what happened was the West End filled up with houses by about 1910. It was full. So then the question was, and a lot of people had built big homes there. So the question was, where could they go to build big houses? And so J.J. Miller and Odlum, all those people, they thought, oh well, we'll sell lots here. We got a good view that and it's a good location up on the hill and everything. But unfortunately, the CPR, they own 6,000 acres of downtown Vancouver.
Yes.
And they developed their subdivision called Shaughnessy, and they spent $1 million on it, just getting it ready. So that just took all the business away from anybody else.
Yeah. Gosh, it's nice talking to you because I've heard all this, but not for years and years and years.
So you heard that a long time ago, did you? Yeah.
Oh yes, yes.
I can remember hearing Grandpa talking about the Odlums.
Grandpa. Oh yeah.
Mom's dad.
What did your dad say about the Odlums? I've met a bunch of them.
Well, my brother was Nell Odlum's best friend.
Nell. Oh yeah.
Well, he was one of the boys. And the Odlums had a summer home up on Marine Drive in West Van.
Oh.
And my brother would be invited to go and spend time with Nell.
So do you remember Victor Odlum?
Oh yeah, he was the hoi polloi of
The hoi polloi. Good word.
wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I worked for him. My first job, I worked for Victor Odlum.
No.
Yeah. Because he started that newspaper, the Vancouver Times, in 1965. Remember that?
Yes.
When the Sun and the Province were on strike?
Now, was that eventually the Vancouver Star?
No, it only lasted a year or two.
Yeah.
Because the Sun and Province came back, and that was the end of it.
That was the end.
But I did have a paper route through the whole British properties for Victor Odlum and the Vancouver Times, and my paper route was 18 miles long. So I had a motorcycle, and I used to zip around on the motorcycle when I was 16 years old.
Oh,
delivering like every 10th house took the paper. So, but I could do it in about less than an hour. So I made good money.
good for you.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I worked for him.
What did the dad do when Uncle Alf was friends with the boy? What did?
I don't know. I think there was always Odlum stocks and bonds. And
Odlum
things.
Brown, stockbrokers. Yeah. Did you know Robert Odlum? Or?
No.
Because when I did my book in 1992, I visited him, and he when you go up Taylor Way, about halfway up, there's all that forest on the left-hand side. Mm-hmm. Well, he was living in there inside this 5 acres of forest or something. I went and visited him. He was like in his 80s. But I was surprised. I grew up in West Van. I never knew there was anybody in those woods there.
No.
He had he wound down the driveway and he's by himself in this house.
Was it quite a nice house?
Well, it was an ordinary house. I don't think it was that old. It might have been a 1950s house kind of thing.
Yeah.
So was this a brother to Nelson, or?
I don't know. There's a few Odlums.
Odlums, yeah. No, his brothers were Nelson, then there was Roger, and two more, and I forget. And then there was a girl, Marjorie, and this is when they lived in Grandview and went to Lord Nelson's school. And the girl died. I forget what it was, polio or something. And it was quite a tragedy.
Where was the Odlum's house?
It's right on Grant and Commercial, and it's actually the crest of the hill on Commercial Drive. The highest point of Commercial Drive is Grant Street.
Okay.
And that's where Odlum stood when the streetcar line was first put through the wilderness in 1891. They got off the streetcar at the very top of the hill and stood there and said, "Oh my God, this is a beautiful view. Right. They should call this Grandview." And then when he had the paper, he had the newspaper, did he? I think he owned one of the big newspapers back around 1905, and he used to write in the newspaper, we're going to call this place Grandview. So he actually created the name Grandview, and his house is right on Commercial Drive, where the liquor store is more or less now, and they moved it back to sell it off for commercial buildings. So and it's a small world. My sister's daughter actually lives in that house now, in the Odlum house. It's a housing co-op.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, she lives in it.
Yeah.
Now Grant Street, where is that?
It's 2 blocks north of First. It goes First, Gravely, Grant. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now, how did Grandpa know the Odlums? Just because of being in the neighborhood and the kids going to school with each other?
Maybe he taught the kids. Maybe he taught the
of
boys
course
woodworking.
he did,
Maybe in his class.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When the war was over, Mr. Watson, where we go out to Haney to have Christmas, Mrs. Watson was an Odlum.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yes. And they almost revered Victor Odlum. That was it, wasn't it, Victor?
Yeah, Victor, yeah.
And the Odlums were wealthy on one side and quite poor on the other.
Oh.
Lived in a little farmhouse there on Dooney Drunk Road.
Oh. In
So
Maple Ridge? Yeah.
Yeah. And that was Mr. Watson after he came back from the war.
What was Mrs. Watson's first name, Mom?
Nettie.
Nettie. So she would have been Nettie Odlum.
Odlum.
Yeah.
And she would be a sister to was she a niece to the prosperous Audens, I guess?
Niece to the prosperous family.
Mhm.
Yeah, and cousin to Nell.
I was just going to say the reason why he built his house at Grant was partly, and that's where the first houses in Granby were, was because, of course, when they were logging the area off, the loggers always built a skid road to the highest point of the land.
Oh.
So Grant was actually the skid road where they skid the logs down to False Creek. So it was effectively the first street in the whole of Granby was Grant Street,
Oh, that's
with him at the very top of the hill with best view of anybody.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they were quite wealthy even then, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, he actually, Odlum, the father, Edward Odlum, he actually traveled the world in promoting immigration to Canada for the Canadian government.
Is that
Yeah.
it?
So that goes together with selling real estate, by the way. So I think he did quite well.
Oh, by the way, I have a piece of property.
Yeah.
Now that you're here.
Now that you're here, I can help you.
Yeah, right.